All right, what's up? Welcome in. South Carolina versus LSU Preview live from BP Skinner here in the Vista. Come on by. We're going to tell you a little bit more about what they have going on here later on in the show. Talking Gamecocks, LSU here, Chris. And obviously, man, we're 48 hours away or so, 48 hours from right now, actually, as we're live. You'll be either sitting at home on your couch watching the game or at Williams-Brice Stadium as the Gamecocks have a big opportunity. 2-0, looking to go 3-0 against the LSU Tigers this weekend. Chris, as we've gathered info, we've heard from really all the coaches, Beamer on Tuesday, coordinators on Wednesday. I know we've watched a little bit of LSU too. What are kind of your opening thoughts on what we're going to see Saturday at Willie B?
I start, big picture, and I thought Shane Beamer talked about this pretty openly during Tuesday's press conference, and that is just recognizing kind of the magnitude of this, right? You're 2-0. Some coaches may take an approach of it's just another game. It only matters how we play. We're not really going to talk about trying to get back-to-back big wins. We're not going to talk about some past times where maybe this program has scored a big win and then gone and kind of, for lack of a better term, laid an egg the next week. He kind of embraced that talk, and it seems like he's been pretty and open and honest with his team about it in terms of what it's going to take to go beat LSU. Wes brought up for quite a lengthy part of his press conference, LSU's new defensive coordinator, Blake Baker, who spent the past 2 seasons at Missouri, and South Carolina's lack of success against those Missouri teams that Blake Baker ran their defense. And so I think he's very much presenting hey, this is going to be a big challenge, and kind of challenging his team through what he's saying in the media. And I'm sure behind closed doors of, hey, we got a big challenge. Let's not run from it. Here's what's happened in the past. Let's try not to repeat this.
Well, I mean, I think you look at the South Carolina fan experience over the years. We've talked about it. The as Brent cuts his eyes at me, the ups, the downs. Yeah. This, I mean, in my opinion, this is not a Shane Beamer thing. This is not, a Will Muschamp thing. I mean, as great as the Spurrier years were, I mean, you had some of that is college football, right? Yes. Like you just week to week, you're still talking about. Even though some of them are very handsomely paid now, you're still talking about 18 to 22-year-old guys for the most part. So you're going to have ups and downs in performance. And I think when you look at the South Carolina, like think about this game from a standpoint of if you were South Carolina baseball when they were really rolling, if you're Dawn Staley and you're the South Carolina women's basketball team, you go into a big game and you really don't have to worry about the pomp and circumstance of a big game. You're used to that attention. You are used to people saying, hey, this is the Super Bowl for another team. Not that this game is a Super Bowl for South Carolina, but it is not very often that South Carolina has had game day in town. You have had an opportunity, I don't want to say fall into your lap, but you have had an opportunity where by taking care of business against Kentucky, this opportunity, they literally stole game day from Kentucky.
Yep.
So now that the opportunity is here, you need to find a way to take advantage of it. But the way to take advantage of the opportunity is by not even caring about the opportunity part and just caring about what happens on the field.
Yep.
So in my opinion, LSU is not quite like LSU is not at their peak right now, but they are still a blue blood. They are still a team that probably doesn't care at all that game day is in town. Doesn't really care about the added attention. They're going to be like, hey, we're LSU. This is just what we do. So I think the goal at South Carolina long-term, if you really want to talk about a program and where you want to be to the point that you go into each week just, hey, this is who we are. We're going to win the game. We don't care about all the outside noise. Are you there yet if you're South Carolina? Obviously not. But I think this would be a great sign for upward mobility for this program to handle the noise and say, no, this is cool, but we're just going to go play.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it'd be, not only set the path to get where you want to go this season, like on a micro level. Obviously, we all talked about this before the season began. If South Carolina is going to have the type of year that they want, and I think everybody's starting point is go out and make it a postseason play, to do that, I think we all thought, hey, you've got to go out and make some progress in this month of September or starting August 31st. You know, you got to go beat Akron, you got to go beat Old Dominion at home, but can you at least split Kentucky and LSU? Well, now you've done that, right? You got to go beat Akron, right? Let's not put the cart before the horse, but you've beaten Kentucky. So now that pressure is off to do that. Now you're staring down the barrel in a positive way of going 4-0 potentially. So you've got that for this season on a here and now level, but on, I think, a bigger level, it might show some growth in the program, right? There have been times in the Beamer, and it's not just Shane Beamer, as you said. That was a great point. Happened with Spurrier, Alabama game in 2010, then the Kentucky game happens. You know, it's happened with multiple.
I think it's
coaches.
happened for decades.
It's decades, and at multiple schools. It's not just a South Carolina thing. It's happened other places. But showing some growth as a program that we can go out and string together back-to-back wins when there's kind of some pressure, when a lot of people are looking at you saying, can you take the next step? But also, like what you said, Wes, that stuff when the game starts is just about blocking, tackling, executing your assignment, and how you prepare for the game. It's going to come down to which teams make the most plays at the end of the day.
We've talked about it all week. This is a very different structured team in LSU and how they want to go about their business versus how, let's say, Kentucky last week.
Yeah.
So what you did last week may not work this week. And I think as you dive into this game, you realize it is a game, in my opinion, in multiple facets of strength versus strength. So that's South Carolina defensive line versus LSU offensive line. It is and I don't even know if you say weakness yet because we're still very early in the year, but it is a battle of question mark versus question mark. We've heard people talk about LSU. Do they have the secondary they're used to having? Do they have the defensive front they're used to having? So far, on paper, no. We know about the questions at wide receiver for South Carolina. Even on the other side, man, I think you look at LSU, you say, hey, they want to go throw the football. If I'm them, though, I know season-wide, like season-long, big picture, at some point I got to try to establish the running game. And, you know, I'm a Cole Kubelik fan. He was talking about the fact that, and I brought this up on the radio show today, have they ran the ball very well? No. Mm-hmm. But have they even really decided to just get hard-headed and tried to run the ball that much? I mean, I think they ran it in the low 20s last week, and they threw it almost 40 times. So that tells you, you know, and that's against a team you at times had a lead against. At other times, you know, Nichols hung in there. Like, give them credit.
They did.
The other side, hey, you have a South Carolina running game. Are there some areas of it that have been improved from last year? I would say yes. Mm-hmm. Is it anywhere near where they want it to be or where it needs to be? No. On the other side, if you're LSU, you're sitting there giving up, 150? How many yards did our boy Guggenheim have?
I think it was 145.
Okay, so
somewhere around there.
So that's, again, sides of this where you have a perceived weakness or question mark that it's question marking, it's question mark. So it's not always about strength versus strength. Sometimes it's about who can sort of shore up a weakness. And even you go look at South Carolina against Kentucky on defense. Fantastic performance. But if there's one thing Kentucky did have some success doing, it was the in-between the tackles run game, especially early on in the first half.
Yes.
Game flow sort of in some ways took Kentucky out of that. But even Kubelik was talking about, hey, Kentucky sort of was like, hey, we got to get these guys involved in jet sweep and play action, all this other stuff. That allowed South Carolina to create negative plays against them. I'll be fascinated. I think end of first quarter, what are we talking about in terms of game plan for both schools, for, you know, and each OC versus each DC and vice versa, I think is going to be fascinating.
It is. And there are a lot of little, you know, battles, the game within the game, as you normally say. South Carolina, very early, first quarter, second quarter, we're going to be looking at it saying, or asking the question, is South Carolina getting pressure with 4 versus this LSU front? 4 or 5 starters back from last season. Very good offensive tackle tandem. maybe the best left tackle in college football. Shane Beamer went through it Tuesday. He's given up 3 sacks in his career. One of them was on a scramble. The other 2, Jared Verse, Will Anderson.
The fourth to Dylan Stewart.
Dylan Stewart.
But Dylan Stewart would be right in the conversation so far.
Yes.
With those 2 guys, I feel like.
Yes, probably. So, can South Carolina get pressure with 4? If so, that's probably a good sign, right? On the other side, LSU, they have some similar questions that they're going to have to answer. I feel like, just as you pointed out, a lot different of a challenge probably for both teams here. South Carolina last week, they had to attack Kentucky's defense by running concepts that are going to bust a zone defense. This week, you're going to be looking at a lot going, all right, we got to win some man-to-man battles. Can South Carolina win those? We don't know. We really, sitting here, don't have any idea. We can speculate. I think they can. I think it'll be 50-50. That's basically all you can do. We just don't have enough data on that yet. LSU's got some injuries that have not only John Emery, their starting running back, but their best starting defensive tackle is going to be out for this game. So a lot of questions I think that both these teams have to answer. And we probably only really have one game each of really good data from each team because LSU playing Nicholls State, they scored 44 points. Kind of an ugly game for them. South Carolina, yes, you beat Old Dominion. Very ugly game for them. LSU has a loss to Southern Cal where you probably have your best data about the team. South Carolina, a win against Kentucky. But, man, even the Kentucky game hinged on a few very, not small, turnovers, right? Mm-hmm. South Carolina still gave up a bunch of negative plays in that game to Kentucky on offense, which they have to avoid in this one.
Well, and interestingly enough, I think you look at South Carolina played better against Kentucky than they did ODU. You would probably argue LSU, despite losing the game, played a better game against Southern Cal than they did against Nicholls. So,
yes.
Nicholls ran all over them in some ways, but they actually stopped the run fairly well against Southern Cal. So, we had a couple people sort of going on there, on the Insiders Forum, like, hey, man, look what Nicholls did to them. We're definitely going to be able to run the football on these guys. And I don't think it's quite that simple.
Yeah.
And some of it, you do sometimes play up or play down a little bit to the situation. That's just kind of life. Like that's football. And so I'll be curious both from a standpoint of just how do you approach it if you're LSU? Do you say we're going to take away this, we're going to take away that? How do they approach trying to defend Eleanor Sellers in the running game? Like, I think there's a lot of different factors that are going to determine. Like, it's not just as simple as, Nicholls ran the ball, South Carolina can run the ball. Lots of Wildcat.
A lot of Wildcat.
Do we see a little bit of Robbie Ash? You notice we did still see a little bit of Robbie Ashford last week, even when it wasn't because of the injury. So do we see that mixed in a little bit this week too? I think it's going to be very, very fascinating to see exactly what that looks like. Let's talk about a couple of sponsors. First of all, our guy Clint Hammond, NMLS number 71597. Check him out. 803-598-4810. That's actually the office number. You'll see his cell phone number above our heads on the graphic. And Clint, as we've told you for, 3 years now, maybe longer, he's been a presenting sponsor of the show here on GC Live. If you're in the market to buy a home or you're just thinking about taking that jump from renting to owning, call Clint. He's going to talk you through what your payment might look like, what options you may have, lots of different creative ways you can get to owning a home. Clint helped me. He can help you as well. Hit him up for more information. Just head on over to ClintHammond.com. And as you can see, we are live here today, just like we were a couple weeks ago, from BP Skinner in the Vista. Brent, what's your address?
1003 Gervais.
1003 Gervais Street, right in the heart of the Vista. You can't miss it. Come on by. What do you say?
2 doors from Mellow Mushroom.
2 doors from Mellow Mushroom. Come see us right now if you happen to be in the area. We actually had Matt O'Brien, former Gamecock walk-on safety, who also was a contributor for Gamecock Central, happened to be in town. He stopped by to say what's up, so shout out to him. If you're in town tomorrow as well, they'll be open until 8 p.m. for the Under the Lights shopping experience. If you're coming into town for the game, haven't had time to get your game day gear yet, they will be open. This is Friday, right?
That's tomorrow.
Friday, tomorrow, yes. Under the Lights, open until 8 p.m. Friday, September 13th. Come on by BP Skinner in the Vista. You can't miss it. And you got a lot of great options around you if you're looking for something to do, hang out around town, get some food, get some beverages. Great spot to come before the game as Columbia just, I imagine, is going to be hopping this weekend. There's going to be a lot going on. Excited about all that. And if you're still kind of on the fence about coming into town, come on into town. You're not going to regret it. And definitely come on by BP Skinner here in the Vista. Chris, I think we had a question or a comment, I think, from, I believe it's from our guy, Travis. This is a game, if you're a South Carolina wide receiver, you need to feel maybe a little bit challenged by this. Like
a lot challenged.
Like you want to feel like this is the game where if you turn on the film from this game and you're an NFL talent evaluator and you're kind of looking for information on, hey, can this guy play in the league? Can you defeat man coverage? Because we talked about it quite a bit. Last week, Kentucky, they play a very, I don't want to say unique style, but they play a specific style of defense under Stoops. And it seems like regardless of who their defensive coordinator is, they kind of do have a similar style most years. They're going to play very consistent, tight zone defense, but you sort of know what you're going to get. This week, it'll be completely different. Lots of man coverage on the outside. I read that they blitz almost 50% of the time, does LSU. So that's completely opposite. You're going to have to, for one, if you're South Carolina, do away with some of those little busts we've seen as far as knowing who picks up who in pass protection. But also, that's one of those things. If you defeat the coverage, like if you can get open, then that's one thing. If you can't, that's when you start to also see coverage sacks, which are those situations where the O-line gets blamed by everyone, but really it's because nobody was open. And so I think if you're Dow Loggins, if you're sort of creating a game plan for this week, where do you like your matchups? Is it with Amazio Bennett in the slot? Is this a big week for like a Dre Jacobs on the outside? Do we see Michael Smith at tight end, who we think is going to be a matchup nightmare in his career at South Carolina? I've been calling for Rocket Sanders in the passing game to get heavily involved. Can you scheme up some ways? We were talking earlier, rub routes, pick routes, mesh routes, anything in against man coverage. You're going to see those routes where guys keep moving. Like against zone, you want to settle in, you want to stop in those opens in the zone, open spots in the zone. Against man, you're going to see movement routes. You're going to see routes where your crossers, your over route, stuff like that. And so I think for South Carolina, it'll be a much different game plan. Can a wide receiver step up? And can Lenora Sellers maybe get back a little bit more involved in the running game? We didn't see it quite as much last week. I think this could be a game where maybe he finds some room in the running game.
Yeah, and I think all those questions that you just laid out that we don't have answers to, but we'll find out, maybe not in the first quarter, but as the game goes on and certainly at the end, we'll have some answers to these things as in terms of how they went. Will be integral, to whether or not South Carolina can win. And LSU is going to play more man coverage. They are going to blitz, as you said, 50% of the time. So to me, you think about man coverage versus zone coverage. Kentucky played a lot of zone. Kentucky caused a lot of negative plays. They had, I think, 4 sacks, and they had the most alarming number, 13 tackles for loss. South Carolina was able to create some explosive plays in that game down the field, and they did enough in the run game to keep them honest. Didn't have a breakout run game, right? But Robbie Ashford had some nice runs. You always have to think about Lenora Sellers running the football. And then Rocket had some nice runs, particularly in the second half of that game. To me, when you think about man coverage that LSU is going to run more, you've got the fact that you now got DBs turning their heads. You've got blitzes. There's, I think, an opportunity, and that's all it is right now, for Rocket to have a bigger game. We know that he's been really, really good and has been throughout his career breaking tackles. Ideally, you want Rocket in space where he can get going where he's not having to break a tackle. He has a few yards of space before he has to get to that one-on-one point. Screens, perimeter runs, can you do a little bit more of that with Rocket? I'm intrigued by what you said by bringing up Robbie Ashford. You pointed out correctly that he still saw a role in the Kentucky game, even when Lenoris came back. Dow Loggins this week on Tuesday or Wednesday during his press conference, he was given the names of some players that, can you get this guy involved? It kind of hypotheticals. Michael Smith was one. Robbie Ashford was one, which was kind of interesting to me. So to me, it seems like there might be a role there. Ashford, you put on tape that he can come in, some of the things you're going to do for him. Do you have some counters off that? I'm intrigued by that. But you're right. Gamecocks, when you scheme up this week, when Dow Loggins, he did a good job of scheming up some things against his own defense last week. You can scheme up man beaters and things like that, but sometimes at the end of the day, man coverage just has to be, I'm going to beat you one-on-one. So can Carolina do that?
Yeah, we'll find out, and I think that will be one of probably a handful of major keys to this game. By the way, while we were on air, just announced Dawn Staley will be the guest picker at game day, and I think a situation where I was curious which way they would go, Chris. There were some rumors. I heard her name mentioned, heard Trick Williams mentioned, the WWE superstar. There were some former players you could have gone with. I thought about, I don't know, maybe Clowney since he's with the Panthers now, not far down the road. Or sometimes ESPN and Game Day sort of go a little bit more towards the route of who's someone that maybe isn't even that directly tied to the school, but just is more known on a national level. With Dawn Staley, you do get the best of both worlds. Somebody obviously has won multiple national championships now, has become, I would say, an even bigger name in sports over the last few years. She was already a big name in sports, but just has kind of exploded in terms of that. And obviously a coach here at the school who will represent the Gamecocks. So I think the pick does make sense.
Makes a lot of sense. I think if you're coming up with a list of a few people, a short list, she would be on it. And so, Dawn's a traveler. She's traveling a lot, so I was kind of curious would she be available or not. But she is. So, yeah, that's a good pick. I think some of the other ones would have been good. I was intrigued by Trick Williams a little bit, to be honest with you. But,
well, he could have cut a promo. I'm sure.
Cut a promo.
We saw him cut one right here on GC Live before he was Trick Williams.
Off the cuff.
Off the cuff.
They probably saw that clip and were like,
hire this guy.
Gotta get this guy in here. But no, Dawn will be good.
Do you think Cornbread had any shot at it, or that was more of a local?
Yeah, probably still more local.
Yeah.
He's got better shot than us.
Well, yeah, but he's got about 600,000 fans now on Instagram. So
that's a good point.
Yeah,
he's getting up there.
How cool do you think it's going to be to see Gamecock Park as the home base for game day this time? I'm fascinated. I'm curious to see what the backdrops look like. I know they do all types of different angles. I mean, this is a production, y'all. Like the number of trucks that are down there right now that have been setting this thing up all week long, you kind of take it for granted just how much probably goes into something like this. And then you're going to actually have it in the stadium for the first time ever, which I think is going to be really, really cool to see. Mike just went off. All right, guys, if you're sitting there, if you're warming up before the game and Pat McAfee is over there, you got to find a way to just relax and not pay attention to it, you know?
Yeah, definitely. No, that will be cool. And so they'll move inside 11 a.m. So that was kind of people's questions when this came out of, well, if game day goes till noon, like, where are people going to be? When should you go to the stadium? This kind of helps you with that. When they move, you can go ahead and move, get in the stadium. USC controlled lots open at 6. So 6 a.m. So plenty of time to get out there and kind of get it going. That'll give you about 5 good hours. And LSU's coming to town. They know how to get it done.
Oh, they party with the absolute best. I'm surprised we're not seeing purple and gold already.
They'll be up at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning to get it started, probably.
Yeah, they throw down. So it's going to be fun. I mean, this weekend, to me, is what college football is all about. It's about the game, of course, but also it's about everything before, after, all the kind of taunting. And there actually is, for two teams that don't really play each other, I mean, it's the first time they've been here since 2008. Mm-hmm. There's kind of a healthy respect, I feel like, between South Carolina fans and LSU fans. Certainly everybody that I know that was at LSU when they moved the game
Yeah.
because of the flooding here. The way LSU sort of treated fans that weekend, I think that went a long way. LSU fans, I mean, they're dealing with a hurricane possibly hitting right now back home. So there is there's like a healthy respect, I think, between the two fan bases. Now, when they kick this thing off, I'm sure there'll be a lot of maybe won't be the case. But after the game, they can all shake hands, share a drink together, and it'll be fine. But I think this weekend is what Gamecock football and just college football in general is all about. And you really have a great opportunity with the eyes of the college football world sort of own you, which you don't always have if you're South Carolina, which brings us to the recruiting side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris, they've really worked hard. It seemed to me even before this became what it is with game day, 2-0 start, they had already sort of focused in on this week in terms of maybe leaning some guys into visiting this weekend, I think. And we've got a list on GamecockCentral.com. We can go through a few of them, though. Big weekend for some 2025s and some 2026 recruits.
Yeah, this list is impressive, and it's continued. The first list that we rolled out, I think, was that Monday. Had some nice names on it, but it's continued to grow. I think yesterday evening we published another update to that list, and it's continued to get better and better. You're right. I mean, even a few weeks ago, tracking some of the names that were already being eyed for this game, it makes sense, right? Because you had kind of the time window. You knew it wasn't going to be a night game, but what you knew was, the ODU game, first home game, but this is your first SEC home game. So it made a lot of sense for the staff to try to target this as the first big one. There will be other ones. There'll be official visit weekends later in the year. There'll be some other opportunities for some big games. This one made a lot of sense. But, Wes, one guy in particular, and there's a bunch of them, I'm looking at Usmani Chroma, 4-star running back out of Georgia. Gamecocks do not have a high school back committed in this class. Jaquel Holman out of Blackville Hilda, in-state guy who's committed, could play it. He plays it in high school. The staff has talked to him about playing it. But Chroma's a big-time guy. He's a top 150 player. He's got offers from Auburn, Georgia, FSU, all the schools. Auburn, huge leader right now. But can you get him on campus? For sure. Can you get a little momentum there? We'll see. He's maybe one of the headliners of this group, but when you look at it, a bunch of your top 2026 wide receiver targets are on campus. A bunch of your top 2026 O-line targets are on campus. And another wide receiver / tight end / athlete from the upstate in Mikel Skinner, who's a Cincy commitment.
Yeah, Mikel Skinner, one of the more interesting recruitments that still remains for 2025. I think now, in the case of the running back you were just talking about, they've kind of worked, I would say, this is not a name, like he has not really mentioned South Carolina much at all if you go back and look at his prior interviews.
Right.
Even when he wasn't mentioning them, they were working hard to try and get him on campus, try to make that happen. And so now you get that shot. And I think, are you typically going to just make a move for a guy with one visit? That's tough, but I think this is one of those things where you talk about opportunity. If he comes in and you have just one of those atmospheres we're talking about for 10 years, down the road, and you have an incredible game, and maybe Rocket has a good day, and they say, look, hey, I don't know if you looked at our commit list, but there are no running backs on it.
Yeah.
By the way, Auburn lost to Cal last week. I don't know if you happen to see that. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
These are one of those things where maybe you do have an opportunity to make a move with somebody like that. So we'll see what happens there. You never know what happens. That's the beauty. You work to get guys on campus and then go from there. See what happens. And with Skinner, it's been about getting them on campus, and not Brent Skinner, Mikel Skinner. It's been about getting him on campus. Recently, you go back to the camp settings, getting him in for that. I mean, Carolina watched him incredibly closely in those. They do offer him. He's already committed. And, I think you look at it, it kind of set up, speaking of things just setting up perfectly, he visits you for the ODU game.
Yeah.
Then he goes to Kentucky, even though, sorry, Josh Stepp, even though he's committed to Cincinnati, it kind of feels like South Carolina and Kentucky are like maybe the front runners.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
But then, so that's his two schools he's really closely looking at. And you're Carolina, you go into their building and empty it out with him on campus. Now he's coming back here this weekend. Dude, I think that one sets up, like, once you kind of get through all the noise, an in-state guy, I know Dow Loggins likes him a lot, has really preached from what I've heard. Hey, man, I had this NFL tight end. This is how I used him. Has told him, you remind me athletically of a lot of those guys that he had in the NFL.
Yeah.
So I think when you look at just all the pieces there, this was a dream school offer, even if it was a little bit late. I think Skinner ultimately, my read is he ultimately can end up in this class.
I think so too. You know, Kentucky had a little buzz for a while before the Kentucky-South Carolina game. Even got some predictions, right?
Yeah.
He kind of pushed back against that on social media, which sometimes, Wes, that happens, and then the kid ends up committing to that same school, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you're like, I don't know. And so even when the Kentucky buzz happened, you knew, okay, there's probably some more visits. Well, you know, will the outcome of the Kentucky-South Carolina game help sway it one way or another? A lot of times in a recruitment, one game doesn't. But when it happens to be two schools you're heavily considering, you know, maybe it does. So this will be the third weekend in a row, to your point, that he has visited South Carolina or visited for a South Carolina game in person, 2 in Columbia, 2 in Lexington. It also could take some time because even though it does seem like Kentucky and South Carolina are really the ones vying for the commitment, he is still committed to Cincy. South Carolina offer was a little bit late. There is some loyalty there. So you see this sometimes, even when a flip almost seems inevitable, sometimes it just takes a while for it to run its course.
And Josh Stepp, great recruiter from the state of South Carolina. He worked really hard to get that commitment in place in the first place. So I don't want to completely, I think that's a good point. Let's not completely write them off, but it is going to be tough, I think, from their perspective to keep him committed, but we'll certainly see what happens there. And we certainly will keep you apprised on Gamecock Central of what that looks like in terms of more visitors being added. If you're listening to this is, by the way, our final podcast of the week. We started doing our preview on Thursday now, moving it up a day instead of on Fridays. So if you're listening to this later on, by now there may even be more names on that list because we've really been able to just sort of keep adding and sort of adjust the list as the week goes on, as South Carolina works hard. Beamer even said they're kind of running out of room.
Yeah.
But I promise you, if you're a 5-star, if you
figure it out,
if you're anything like Dylan Stewart, then they'll find a spot for you. They'll find somewhere for you to sit in the stadium, even if you have to sit on the game day set.
Hey, why not? And by the way, shout out to the students for South Carolina. Record number of student ticket requests, 20,000. So that'll help, Wes, with the volume level in Williams-Brice Stadium on Saturday.
Stay the whole game.
Stay the whole game. Do it.
Stay the whole game.
Yep. Now, on the point, it was funny. I went to a game recently at South Carolina, and I was like, wow, man, good for the students. Like, they're really coming out. And at halftime, they left en masse. I guess they got their point.
Yes.
You know? Do you get your point if you stay at the football game till halftime as well?
I
don't know, but let me say, if it's not the case, you should have to stay the entire football game to get your credit.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes. But how do they know?
I don't know.
See,
some kind of surveillance. We need it.
AI surveillance. Trying to get a couple of numbers for y'all on. Yeah, let's go ahead and tell everybody real quick before we get too far, because I will forget, honestly. Prize Picks.
There you go.
You can get $50 right now if you play $5. If you use the code GC on Prize Pick. Prize Picks is daily fantasy, and it is, in my opinion, the top daily fantasy sports app in like the universe, Chris. That's just my opinion. So Yeah, play $5, get $50 instantly. Use that code GC. And right now, we got some projected totals right now for South Carolina players are on there. You got Lenore Sellers, 29.5 rushing yards. Lenore Sellers, 175.5 passing yards. Also, they've got some kind of unique ways to play the games on here. 215.5 passing plus rushing yards if you want to kind of get a little bit unique with it. So, obviously, you don't have to play with South Carolina. You can get on here college football, NFL, MLB. They've got also before the season, you have like whole season things where you can look at the projected totals. And all you're going to do is put on there, you're going to create a lineup, and you're going to say more or less in terms of whatever their projected total is. So right now, for example, Jordan McLeod, Texas State quarterback against ASU, 250.5 passing yards. So, Chris, if you had a really deep feeling about what Jordan McLeod was going to do this week, you would just click more or less, and that would be the first guy in your lineup. They also have lots of times, Chris, I've noticed they will give you free cards. So if you want to play a card with Caleb Williams right now, who's now, of course, the quarterback for the Chicago Bears, they have it set at 0.5 passing yards. So you would just hit over, or you would hit more than, and that would be your projected pick for him, and that would essentially be a free card for you. So shout out to Prize Picks again. Use code GC to get, $50 if you just play $5 in lineup. Shout out to those guys for being a new sponsor here on the GC podcast. And I want to get back into some just details in the game, some of these matchups, and then we'll give our predictions, and then we're going to get out of here and get rolling into the weekend. Chris, we talked a little bit about kind of defeating that man coverage. I don't know if we've gone enough into the actual battle in the trenches, though, the one everybody's going to be looking at. Strength on strength.
Yep.
Does LSU do what I have a little bit of a gut feeling they're going to do and actually come out and try to establish the run? Or, coaches do have egos. Coaches, a lot of times, they trust their guys. Are they going to say, look, we don't care that they have Dylan Stewart. We don't care they have Kyle Kennard. I trust my offensive tackles. I trust my Joe Moore award finalist offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to come in. I'm going to drop back. I'm going to throw the football, and I'm going to show that we just are who we are, and we're going to dictate this game. Which side of that do you think LSU will be on?
I do think first of all, they're going to have to be a little more balanced in being able to run the football to have success. As good as Garrett Nussmeier is, as good as that offensive line is, I feel like it's going to be hard for them to come in and win the game having Garrett Nussmeier throw for 350 yards this year, right? You may say, well, now Mississippi State lost that game last year to South Carolina because South Carolina had a very explosive offensive performance as well. Mississippi State threw for, it seemed like 400-something yards in that game, going up and down the field, right? That's tough, but I feel like the secondary for South Carolina is in better position this year, even losing Marcel Stout. And obviously the biggest difference is the front, right? So it is strength on strength with this Gamecock defensive front going up against LSU. I feel like LSU is going to lean on that strength. But I do think they're going to try to run the football probably more than we have seen.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to do it. And I like the point you made earlier. You go back and look at the tape, the first two games. South Carolina gave up some runs to Kentucky. They were able to keep them out of the end zone ultimately. But they did show, some problems there straight ahead in the run game. So LSU's probably looking at that saying, we got a good offensive line too. Mm-hmm. They're great pass blockers, but they can block for the run. We may not have John Emery. We don't have Leonard Fournette walking through the door, but we have some guys who are capable, who are on scholarship at Louisiana State University. You need to go run the football. So that'll be very interesting. What do you think of the strategy?
Yeah, well, I think there's something to be said, especially in college football, where emotions and the ebbs and flows play such a big part. I think there's something to be said for LSU sort of maybe hearing all week that they can't run the football, that they don't have a rushing attack. If they go in, especially if you're South Carolina and you're preparing for them to stretch the field and to throw the football, and they go in and they just say, no, we're establishing the line of scrimmage from a physical standpoint, from a run the football standpoint, and sort of run right at you, then that can kind of affect the early kind of opportunity to dictate the game. So far, South Carolina certainly defensively dictated the first game. It felt a little bit like Kentucky was about to dictate that game at the very beginning when they're having that run success. And I think the difference in those two teams is if LSU was able to run the ball early, they also have the passing attack to drop back and be balanced.
Yeah.
Kentucky, we saw, just had no chance to protect the passer. And then once Vandergrift got rattled, like that was it. It was over. So I don't think you quite have that this week. Like if LSU's running the ball, then they're going to start going play action. They're probably going to have a little success. I think it is huge for Carolina to try and get into some of those third and longs and actually be able to see what this battle is. What you really want to see is if it's 3rd and 10 against most teams South Carolina plays with this bunch, and this has not always been the case. We know that. I feel good. Like if 3rd and long, I'm like, okay, 3rd and long, like that's where you want to live if you're South Carolina. This may be the one week though where LSU is going to go into their 3rd and longs and say, we don't have to be worried about 3rd and 9 because we feel good about our guys in pass protection. How does Clayton White decide to play that? Does he add on in terms of pass rush? Does he add on in terms of let's take away Kyron Lacey and make these other receivers beat us?
Yep.
Like I think there's a lot of different ways you could go about that if you're South Carolina. Like you said earlier, you hope you're getting pressure with 4 because that minimizes all the other decisions. If you're getting pressure with 4, it opens up a whole world of things. We said this earlier this week, I liked how even though they were getting pressure with 4, they did not let Kentucky relax into thinking, oh, they're just going to bring 3 or 4. He tacked on just enough. We saw some cornerback blitzes early on. We saw what looked like a 0 blitz with 6 guys coming on a 3rd and long when really I'm sitting there on TV. I'm like, oh, this is simulated pressure. They're going to drop out. And then, no, you have Demetrius Knight and Debo Williams flying through the A-gap at you with, I believe, Dylan and Kennard on the outside. Like, that's tough to there is a thought process. I'll give credit. Venables at Clemson, they were so good because he had the dudes up front, and instead of just saying, oh, I can get pressure with 4, which is a great thought, he said, well, if I can get pressure with 4, what happens if I still blitz? You know what I'm saying? What happens if I still –
let's try this.
So I saw a little bit of that blood in the water mindset from Clayton White, which I liked. Yeah. And, Clayton talked earlier this week. He said a number of little things that I caught my attention. First thing was he just loved the energy of his guys last week. They sort of dictated. They got off the field the first drive, and it was just palpable on the sideline from what he said. So who takes the early command of this game from an energy standpoint is going to be something to keep an eye on.
I mentioned the reason I brought up the Mississippi State game earlier last year is because even though Mississippi State threw for 400 yards, they were so one-dimensional. Remember Woody Marks, now playing for Southern Cal, who just played LSU in week 1, didn't do much. Really good back. He didn't do much in that game. They were extremely one-dimensional. Garrett Nussmeier and that offensive line, they're probably capable of having a really nice passing performance. Even if Carolina plays fairly well on defense, what you don't want is them to be able to add on, like you said, that run game element, because then they're balanced, they're able to use play action, they're able to take shots. It becomes a lot more difficult. So early on, I think first couple drives, not a 60-yard touchdown pass, but when LSU can actually string together a few runs and we can be able to assess how much success are they having. If Carolina is able to shut them down, prevent big runs, every run's 2-3 yards, that to me will be a good sign in the game, because then you're going to keep them one-dimensional.
Yeah, and I think all these things will add up to determining who wins the game. Can Lenore Sellers take another step forward? I really liked the decision-making on when to run the football, when to keep his eyes downfield. We talked about that with Ramon Robinson before the season started. And then you even go back to Lenore's in high school, Lenoris in the spring game earlier this year. That ability to keep his eyes downfield and sort of just feel the rush, but let things open up because he's able to escape the pocket. He's kind of natural at that. And we all saw game one. It felt like because he got sped up so much, some of that natural ability maybe went away for a day and his mechanics were a little bit off. There were a couple of times where he was just off in terms of being balanced when he was throwing the football. For him to hit some of those throws against Kentucky, I liked even a couple of them, a guy's wide open. There was no sense of, you ever see quarterbacks who are kind of second guessing themselves? When a guy's wide open, you sort of see that they almost don't throw the ball naturally. It's like they overthink it when a guy's wide open and maybe they'll miss them or the throw just doesn't quite look the way it's supposed to. He just, within the rhythm of getting out of the pocket, just flicks the ball to those guys in those scenarios, made good throws, didn't overthink it, didn't try to lead them too far, but didn't put too much under it either. He just went about his business. And I think for them, can you keep making some of those tight window throws on Saturday? I even like the fact after he threw the interception, he really seemed to have a short memory on that. Like, he kept firing the football. You were kind of wondering, all right, you don't want this to be a here we go again scenario where he kind of gets into that mindset from the week before. I saw no signs of that, man. Like, to me, he looked like a guy who just moved along. He even had a little smile on his face when they showed him after the pick. I think he knew, I messed up on that one. He had an open receiver. I think he just didn't get rid of the ball quite quickly enough. So some fantastic early signs, in my opinion, in this kid's career. Now we find out, are we going to see a little bit of that sort of just incremental, is it going to be up and down, or is he able to take another big step forward this week? And how much do they put on him as well? We saw them be way more aggressive in the red zone in terms of giving him some high-value throws, like some NFL-type throws, and for the most part, he made them.
He did, and that was the growth we talked about from first and second quarter to the second half of the Kentucky game. A question of a young quarterback, about any young quarterback, is this is his first time on the road. You had some adversity in the first half with the pick. You had putting the ball in danger, right? Came out the second half, played much better. And for a redshirt freshman, I don't know if that's typical, So you come back home now to be a different type of challenge. You're probably going to see more man coverage against an SEC team than you saw last week. So last week was challenging for sure. This will be a different type of challenge, different types of throws, different way to administer the offense. So it'll be fascinating. I like the question you asked, what does the staff put on him? That's a question I have. But, how does he perform in those situations? I think he's going to incrementally get better. Will he make mistakes? Sure. But I think from game one to game two, he showed improvement. I expect a little bit more of that in this game.
Well, and I think if that happens, that maybe changes my expectation for what this game even looks like. Yeah. It takes a little bit of that pressure back off the defense.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like, early on, especially game one, there was so much pressure on the defense. The way it ended up playing out, that's maybe not what we expected on paper, but there was so much pressure on the defense. And we talked about that going into the season. The onus may be on the defense to sort of make some plays and keep the total down, like keep what's it going to take to win this game? 21, 24, something like that. Like, the onus was on the defense to do that. And I think we have seen that, but those things work hand in hand. So the better the offense gets, which ultimately a lot of that is going to be about your young quarterback. How many steps can Lenoris take this week? Then, maybe LSU, all those kind of check boxes we're talking about. Let's say LSU does have success running and throwing. That may be, oh, shoot, Carolina's in trouble. But then let's say Sellers takes another big step. You may say, well, shoot, they're taking advantage of LSU's defense as well. Yeah. Like, is there a thought in your mind, could we end up talking about a much higher scoring game than anybody expects if Sellers is on his and the LSU O-line is able to keep Kennard and Dillon off the quarterback?
It could be. I will not give too many details yet about my score prediction. I generally think it's going to be lower. Would I be shocked if we're coming in here talking about both teams scoring, 35 points? I imagine that's about, where you are and thinking about, hey, if this is a higher scoring game. That's a good point. And I can't say I'd be shocked by it, even if I don't really think that's going to happen.
You ready to give some scores?
Let's give some scores. I got a little micro prediction for something in the game, too.
Okay, let's hear that first.
All right, micro prediction. I think you really put this in my mind. I got to credit you. Go back and look at the Nichols State game. A lot of Wildcat, as you said. Nichols actually scored on a halfback pass as well in the game. I think this coaching staff's looking at the LSU defensive front without Jacoby and Guillory, who's their best defensive tackle, going Wildcat. And I think Robbie Ashford, not that Sellers won't be a part of the game plan with his legs too, but I think Robbie Ashford in the game as a runner, with the knowing in the back of your mind, if you're Blake Baker, the LSU defensive coordinator, this guy's actual quarterback, he can throw the ball. I think Robbie Ashford plays a role in the run game. He and Rocket Sanders in the backfield. Maybe just one drive, maybe a couple plays here and there. I think he plays a role, though.
Do you think we see the little wrinkle, the tight end insert, tight end in the A gap that we saw last
With
week?
Robbie Ashford?
Could happen.
I like it.
I'm going to go back to the well. I like this micro prediction. I'm going to go back to the well of what I said earlier this week. In case it does happen, just to hammer it home, South Carolina's secret weapon on defense, Bakari Swain.
Okay. Like
if maybe we don't see a lot of them early. Maybe it's typical situation. But if LSU is winning battles down the field in the passing game, I think Bakari is a guy. He's still developing as a player, as a corner. But just from a elite movement skills, kind of that suddenness that he has as an athlete, maybe you say, hey, let's just try to let him go match up and try to lock one of these guys down. It'd be a great test for a young player, but I do think that kid is that special athletically. So
I like it.
let's keep an eye on that if it comes to that for South Carolina. Maybe you shut them down and we're not even – if Carolina shuts down the LSU running game and it turns into a passing-only game, then I really think over time, they also can wear down even the LSU O-line because Carolina, again, is going to come at you in waves. They're going to rotate guys in and out. But wouldn't that be a story? If they wear down that O-line, then who's stopping you? If not,
if South Carolina is 3-0 after this game, and they have a few sacks of Garrett Nussmeier in this game, and he's under pressure the whole game, the hype level for this defense, the defensive line, will kick up to the next level, and frankly, it'd be well deserved at that point too.
100%. And I did want to make one more point I keep missing. Rush and cover. Yeah. How much of the problems that were attributed to the secondary last year were because you weren't getting home on the pass rush? I am convinced that was a huge part of it. Yeah. It's easy to be like, oh, that guy got open. How long did he have to get open? This year, you're seeing this. The secondary has played very well, except for a bust or two. And a big part of that, though, is quarterbacks do not have near as long to get the ball out. So something will give this week, whether it's LSU side or South Carolina side. I cannot wait. I'm tired of talking about it, honestly. I can't wait to just see what happens, see what surprises us. I'm sure there'll be something where we're like, didn't see that coming. We haven't even talked about special teams. They have a transfer returner in Xavion
Thomas, probably.
Xavion Thomas.
Yeah.
Last year,
was it State?
Last year, LSU literally fair caught just about every punt because I think they fumbled to start the season on a punt return, and they said we're just fair catching everything. No more. They've basically already had more returns in 2 games than they did like all last year.
Yeah.
So we talked about special teams going into last week. Joe D, his dudes, they won that battle handily last week.
Big time.
So does that become a factor this week? That's something nobody has really kind of dove into yet. So that's another thing maybe to keep an eye on the side. But, all right, it's that time. Who you got winning? What's the score?
I'm going to get real specific for you. I've got Carolina winning. I mentioned Robbie Ashford earlier. I've got a Robbie Ashford score. I've got a Rocket score, and Michael Smith.
So there's
From
at
the
least
Lawrence Sellers.
three touchdowns.
24-20 South Carolina is what I've got.
Okay. Brent is
Brent likes
nodding in
I
approval.
think he likes it.
Brent, you got a score?
I don't.
No, he didn't.
It's it goes bad.
Okay, Brent.
Yeah, we're not going to let him.
I will make another prediction.
Okay.
Friday at BP Skinner, everybody's gonna come out and have a great time. So and y'all are open until 8 o'clock Friday.
Yep.
Come on by, Heart of the Vista. You got options all around you for a great meal. Come down, get your game day fit. You'll be open till 8.
Be up to 8. Come hang out, talk some football. Go Cox.
There it is.
There it is.
Brent
There it is.
Skinner in the background over here. Y'all come by and see them. Shout out again to Brent, his awesome team over here, his awesome wife for hosting us, letting us hang out, letting us be at BP Skinner here in the Vista. Against my better judgment, I'm going to pick South Carolina as well.
Against your better judgment.
So
So the gut pick is LSU.
Well, no, I'm not saying that, dude. I'm just telling you, it's just funny how even so last week, people and we predicted Kentucky to win.
Yes.
But we also said
Very wrong.
no. Here's what we said: South Carolina's got to play better before you're going to pick them, right?
That's right.
And that's what happened. But even with us picking Kentucky, some people said, "Oh, there's no way Carolina's even going to score that many points." So I'm like, then after Kentucky wins, oh well, you didn't pick South Carolina.
You're not
So,
a believer. Yeah.
I don't know what you want. I just feel like too often Carolina plays bad one week, next week everybody picks them to lose.
Yep.
Carolina plays good one week, next week everybody picks them. Watch the picks this week. Everybody's going to pick South Carolina.
Yeah.
Including us. So
Yeah.
We're part of the problem.
No, they're all, no. Here's how
It's a game of matchups.
Let me go behind. I did, and I'm doing exactly what you're kind of poking fun at. I kind of decided in my mind because I said Kentucky was a prove it game. They proved it.
Yeah.
Kind of said in my mind, if they beat Kentucky, I'm going to pick them to beat LSU. But then I was like, nah, I don't need to handle it that way. Let me look at it. So taking my honest, there are games right now on the schedule. South Carolina could be 4-0. I'm picking them to lose some games on the schedule this year, right? So try not to be a prisoner of the moment, but I do have Carolina.
Okay, I got Carolina too. I've got this little thing in my mind that I think LSU is going to run the ball more than we expect.
You made a compelling case.
But then I'm like, all right, can South Carolina offensively, can they match them?
Yeah.
If that happens.
Yeah.
What was your score?
24-20.
Let me go slightly higher. I'm going to go 27-24.
Okay.
Alex Herrera keeps it up. That guy's an unsung hero so far.
So far?
He has been calm, collected, very impressive.
Yep.
So good for Alex. That was a question mark coming
Good
in.
for him.
He's been really, really good. And we'll see, man. This is going to be fun. Let me go ahead and get in early, though. South Carolina is going to – the 3 games in a row that on paper look impossible, I'm going to go ahead and get in early. They're going to beat Oklahoma this year.
Oh.
So that'll be the one out of those 3 because Ole Miss and Alabama, that's going to be – I don't want to say impossible. That's going to be very, very tough to win.
Heavy lift.
Oklahoma, terrible matchup for Oklahoma because Carolina D-line, their O-line, that goes the Gamecocks' way, I think. So get in early on that. But yeah, I'll take Carolina. I'm 100% admitting I'm a prisoner of the moment. Game day is here. I love Columbia when everybody's fired up about football and not whining about football. So I'm here for it. I'll pick them. Let's go see what happens. Complete coverage on GamecockCentral.com. And, of course, we'll have recruiting coverage on Sunday as well. Appreciate y'all for joining us. This has been fun. I'm ready to get to the game and see what happens. And, we'll be back on Monday. Y'all come by, BP Skinner, open until 8 o'clock on Friday. Get your game day fit. Shout out to him again for having us here. And we'll see y'all next week.